They said it was an accident. Slipped on a wet rock. Lost balance. But I remember the smirk on Lucas's face as I gasped, water flooding my lungs. "Stop being dramatic," he said, like my drowning was performance art. My husband stood feet away, frozen, not with fear, but indifference. That was the moment I died the first time, not in the lake, but in their eyes. I survived, dragged myself out with more than mud in my veins. I had questions, I had a memory, and I had a plan. They tried to erase me. Now they'll learn the ghost remembers everything. The lake shimmered like melted glass that morning, soft ripples folding over one another as if nothing had ever gone wrong there. Claire stood barefoot at the edge, her white linen dress brushing against her calves, sun-kissed and silent. Behind her, laughter floated from the patio where Ethan poured mimosas and his mother commented, again on the wrinkle at the corner of Claire's eye. Everything was perfect, just enough, just performative enough. She had learned to smile at the right times, to nod instead of argue, to laugh even when the joke carved into her dignity. The Marshalls were wealthy, well-respected, and terrifyingly well-practiced in the art of polite cruelty. Claire was the beautiful wife, quiet, composed, non-threatening, a piece of fine porcelain set on the family mantel, admired, never touched. Ethan loved her in a way men love awards they can't earn again. Lucas, his older brother, didn't even bother pretending. "Careful there, Claire," he called out as she stepped onto the small wooden dock. "You break easy." She turned to respond, but her foot slipped, slick algae, unnoticed, and suddenly the world tilted. Her arms flailed, the air left her throat in a strangled gasp, and then came the plunge. Cold water swallowed her whole. Panic clawed up her chest as she kicked, but her dress tangled around her knees. The sun fractured above her, a kaleidoscope blur. She reached up, desperate, needing just one hand to pull her back. And then she saw him, Lucas, standing at the edge of the dock, looking directly at her, smiling. "Stop being dramatic." She sank, just for a second, maybe less, long enough to feel the betrayal slice deeper than the water's chill, long enough to realize Ethan wasn't running toward her. He wasn't yelling her name. He wasn't even moving. Something pulled her upward, sudden, forceful. Hands under her arms, dragging her to the muddy bank. She coughed violently, lake water spewing from her lungs, eyes burning. "You okay?" a voice asked, shaky but young. She blinked and saw a boy, maybe 12, soaked and shivering, barefoot like her. "You fell. I saw you. That man didn't help. I didn't know what to do, so I jumped." Claire couldn't answer. Her throat was raw, her heart heavier than her soaked dress. The boy ran off before she could ask his name. Back at the house, no one mentioned her fall, not even Ethan. They all smiled too hard, poured more wine, toasted the evening like nothing had happened. Lucas winked at her across the table. Claire smiled back, but something inside her had already snapped. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Claire sat in the darkened hallway, watching the reflection of the chandelier twist in the marble floor. Lucas walked past without noticing her. He smelled of whiskey and arrogance. She followed him, not consciously, more like a reflex. He paused by a picture frame on the wall and tilted it, just a hair. She waited until he disappeared into his room, then stepped forward. Behind the frame, embedded in the drywall, was a small black lens. Claire stared at it. Her skin buzzed. The next day, she left the estate under the pretense of a spa appointment. Instead, she drove into the city and met with an old contact, Layla, a data security expert who owed Claire more than a few favors. Claire handed her a flash drive and asked one question. "Can you find out who's watching me?" Layla nodded without asking more. "I'll run it through behavioral analysis and see if any deepfakes are circulating." That night, Claire returned home to silence. But it wasn't peace. It was the kind of silence that hums behind glass, where everything looks normal, but nothing is. She began to notice how Lucas always appeared behind her in mirrors, how Ethan grew colder each day, how her own voice sounded different on voicemail. 3 days later, Layla called. "You're not going to like this." "I already don't." "Someone's creating synthetic videos of you. It's advanced. Voice cloning, facial gestures. Looks like you're saying things you never said. Some of it's intimate." Claire felt her stomach tighten. "Where is it being used?" "I found one sent directly to Ethan's email yesterday. File name, Claire Confession Final MP4. That night, she walked into the den and found Ethan staring at his laptop, glass of scotch in hand. His face was pale, expression unreadable. "Is there something you want to tell me?" he asked, voice tight. Claire looked at the screen. It was her face, her voice, saying things she had never said. She said nothing, but inside she was already burning. The morning after the video, Claire didn't scream. She didn't throw the laptop or demand answers. She simply smiled, kissed Ethan's cheek, and said she was going to pick up croissants. Then she walked into town and bought a voice recorder, 2 encrypted USBs, and a new burner phone. Lucas had declared war. What he didn't know was that Claire had been trained for this battlefield long before she ever said, "I do." She started small. A comment dropped casually during breakfast, watching for Twitch reactions from Lucas. A glass set down too hard when she mentioned her college roommate. Subtle tension in his jaw when she asked what brand of coffee he liked. Every micro-expression, every breath, she logged it like code. At night, she played the audio back on loop, feeding it through Layla's prototype AI model designed to read emotional deviations, an experimental tool Claire had helped build years ago in DC, before she walked away from it all. The readings came back red. Lucas wasn't just lying, he was choreographing. Claire reached out to an old friend from her journalism days, Dev Patel, now working with a Swiss-based media transparency watchdog group. She sent him 2 files, one of the deepfake Lucas had sent Ethan and another of her real voice reading the same script. Within 48 hours, Dev called her back. "Claire, this isn't amateur work, it's military-grade manipulation. And it's not the first time your husband's family has been flagged. There's a case from 1996. Political scandal, buried fast. Same surname, same tools." Claire didn't blink. She just asked, "Can you help me prove it?" Dev didn't hesitate. "I'll get the metadata trail, but Claire, this might go deeper than just Lucas." That night, Claire sat on the edge of the bathtub, staring at her reflection in the mirror. She began muttering to herself, just loud enough for the hallway mic to catch. Fragmented sentences, incoherent thoughts. She staggered in front of the kitchen staff, dropped a glass, and mumbled about her dead sister. There was no sister. But the story made its way to Lucas by lunch. He began treating her differently. Less arrogance, more condescension, like she was fragile glass finally cracking. Perfect. The next evening, she offered to make tea. She handed Lucas his cup first, then sat with her own, letting her spoon clink louder than usual. She watched him stir the sugar in hers when he thought she wasn't looking. 2 hours later, when he left the room, she retrieved the hidden camera she'd planted above the stove. Played it back frame by frame. Lucas had slipped a clear liquid from a dropper into her mug. Claire didn't cry. She uploaded the footage to her encrypted drive and labeled it, Evidence Phase 1. The following week, she asked Layla to recover her old clearance documents, things she had buried after leaving government work. Her name hadn't been in the public domain for years, by design. But in a locked vault in her old apartment, beneath floorboards no one had touched in a decade, Claire found the old files, credentials, project logs, a schematic of behavioral surveillance software, signed by her. She wasn't just a former analyst. She was the lead mind behind one of the first U.S. civilian programs used to detect manipulation in AI-driven content. She'd walked away when her mentor, her father, died under mysterious circumstances after whistleblowing on a military data breach. No justice had come, no trial, just silence. And now, the same mechanisms were being used against her. Claire opened her old laptop and began building a digital spider web, a map of connections. Lucas's hedge fund investments, her mother-in-law's consulting firm registered in the Cayman Islands, Ethan's trust fund restructured 3 months after their wedding. It all led back to a single private equity group, Artemex Holdings. She cross-checked Artemex's board. Lucas was the silent partner. Ethan didn't know. Using a series of shell accounts and borrowed IDs, Claire began quietly buying up micro-shares in Lucas's biotech company. Nothing obvious. Just enough to establish legal footing, to get access to board votes, to pull one thread at a time without him feeling the fabric unraveling beneath him. One morning, an encrypted message pinged her burner. No name, no subject, just the line, "I know what he did to you. He did it to me too. I can help." Attached was a single PDF, the original board minutes from an Artemex acquisition in 2018, with Lucas's signature. Next to a name Claire hadn't seen in a decade, her father's. She stared at the screen, blood draining from her face. Lucas hadn't just targeted her, he had erased her past. Claire stood in the great hall, arranging candles on the long mahogany table, while pretending to care about which wine paired best with dry duck. Her voice lifted in practiced excitement as she asked the staff to bring in more roses, her mother-in-law's favorite. The woman hated her, but Claire smiled wider every time she passed by. Just another charming daughter-in-law eager to please. The party was her idea. A surprise celebration for a woman who loathed surprises, and even more so anything Claire touched. But this wasn't about flattery. It was a stage. And tonight, Claire would be the invisible conductor. 3 days earlier, she'd replaced the main security hub's routing address with a mirrored server of her own. Every camera in the mansion now recorded to a drive she controlled. Every angle, every whisper. She didn't just want to expose Lucas, she wanted to control the edit. Guests arrived by the hour, sipping champagne beneath cascading orchids. Classical music swelled in the background, and Claire floated from group to group like smoke, always smiling, always just out of focus. Lucas arrived late, as always, crisp suit, half smirk. He clinked his glass lazily, then pulled Ethan aside with a hand on his shoulder and a sealed envelope in his other hand. Claire caught the movement, followed with her eyes. Ethan opened the envelope, scanned the first page, then the second, slower. His posture stiffened, his jaw locked. When he turned toward her across the room, his expression had changed, something fractured in the way he looked at her. Claire approached slowly. Ethan didn't wait. "Did you think I'd never find out?" he whispered. "Find out what?" He shoved the papers into her hands. Medical records, photos, a sonogram, termination of pregnancy, patient Claire Marshall. Date, 8 months before their wedding. She read every word. Read it again. Her heart thudded. Not because of guilt, but because she recognized the hospital, the doctor's name, even the handwriting on the form. And none of it was hers. The woman in the sonogram photo had her cheekbones, her freckles, even the same half-moon scar on the collarbone. But it wasn't her. It was a deep clone. She didn't speak, couldn't. Not with cameras watching, not with 100 eyes blinking around her, waiting for the wrong move. She folded the documents gently and handed them back to Ethan. "That isn't me," she said softly. He didn't respond. Later that night, when the guests had gone and her mother-in-law retreated with a full bottle of Merlot, Claire locked herself in the study. She pulled up her laptop, accessed the mirrored server, and scanned footage from earlier. There it was, Lucas handing the envelope to Ethan, Ethan's fingers shaking. Claire's own face frozen in confusion. Frame by frame, she isolated Lucas's expression, played it at 0.5x speed. He wasn't angry. He was delighted. The next day, Claire traced the hospital files. The medical ID used didn't exist. The image files originated from a startup biotech firm, Velinex Systems, an AI-driven digital identity platform that Lucas had quietly invested in 2 years ago. Their public pitch was secure health record storage. Privately, they developed human data replicants. Claire hacked in through a back door, one she had learned in her previous life. In the archive, she found dozens of Claire Marshalls, photos, audio files, 3D facial scans, voice simulations. She uploaded a single line of code, a dormant trigger embedded in the next administrative login. Once activated, it would begin copying the entire database to a remote server, hers. And if anyone tried to shut it down, it would publish publicly. She labeled it Adagio. The next evening, the system went dark. Layla, her only digital lifeline, stopped answering. Claire tried every encrypted line, every dead drop address. Nothing. Then Ethan stopped talking to her. Not cold, not cruel, just hollow. Like he was watching her but seeing something else, someone else. On the 5th night, she woke to the sound of quiet sobbing. Not hers. Ethan sat at the edge of the bed, back to her, hands clenched in his lap. She reached out. He didn't flinch. "Ethan?" she said softly. He turned, eyes red, mouth trembling. Then he whispered, "Who are you?" Claire stared at him, unsure whether to scream or weep. In the silence that followed, she realized the game had shifted. It wasn't just about truth anymore. It was about identity. And hers was being rewritten, line by line. The house was smaller than she remembered. The roof sagged, the shutters hung crooked like tired eyes, and moss swallowed most of the wooden steps. Claire hadn't been here since she was 14, since before her grandmother died, and the woods swallowed the memories whole. She parked the car a mile away, walking the rest of the path by foot just in case. It wasn't paranoia anymore. It was procedure. Inside, everything was exactly where her grandmother had left it. Dried lavender over the sink, the chipped ceramic swan on the mantel, a rusted music box beside the window. Claire moved like a ghost, fingertips brushing along the dust. It wasn't until she lifted the floorboard under the old sewing table that she found what she came for, a tin box, heavy, taped shut. Inside, journals. Dozens. Handwritten, yellowed. Some pages stuck with age. The ink wobbled in places like her grandmother's hands had trembled while writing them. Claire read for hours. The story unfolded like a sickness. A family, respected, untouchable, white-collar nobles who had helped the town recover after the war. They owned the local newspaper, the radio tower, even the church's printing press. They spread whispers, rewrote sins, created enemies from silence. Anyone who opposed them disappeared. Reputations vanished overnight. Lives unraveled from stories that were never true, but were repeated often enough to become real. Claire turned the page. The family name, Marshall. Not hers, Ethan's. It wasn't new. It was legacy. She sat in the middle of that abandoned cabin and let herself grieve, not for her marriage, not even for herself, but for every woman who had been turned into fiction because some man owned the pen. When she returned to town, she didn't go home. She went to a data center outside the city limits and booted the server she had buried under layers of false identities. Her folder, labeled Swan Code, contained every deepfake, every financial record, every metadata trail linking Lucas, Velinex, and the fabricated Claire. She opened her social media burner accounts, 20 in total, each with a unique voice, location, and follower base. One by one, she dropped the files, videos, screenshots, comparisons, dates, logs, contracts. The story spread like wildfire. High-profile investor linked to digital identity manipulation scheme. Claire watched the comments pour in. She saw journalists tag one another, activists post breakdown threads, anonymous accounts stitch together timelines in real time. Then one video surfaced she hadn't released. It showed Lucas, grainy, phone footage, speaking to a man in a gray suit near a government office. "There's no version of this where she walks away clean," Lucas said. "You promised silence." The man's face wasn't clear, but the lapel pin was. Homeland Intelligence. Claire hit pause. The rot was deeper than she thought. She reached out to Dev again, this time not as a friend but as a whistleblower. He introduced her to an underground network of ethical hackers who called themselves Siren Protocol. They had exposed corrupt police databases, unearthed suppressed medical trials, and now they wanted Lucas. Claire sent them everything, every byte. Within 48 hours, Lucas's name was trending globally under a new alias, the God of Illusions. A viral thread broke down his rise through forged acquisitions, AI-laundered identities, and ties to private security firms accused of digital warfare. The receipts were all there, verified, cross-checked. Claire didn't stop there. She filed a petition with the federal court under the Financial Transparency Reformation Act, a new piece of legislation that allowed spouses to demand forensic audits of joint and inherited assets in cases of digital fraud. It was signed the next day. Ethan was notified. His name would be on every page. The morning of the broadcast, Claire wore white. Not out of symbolism, it was the only clean thing left in her apartment. She walked into the studio with her own camera crew, funded anonymously through Siren Protocol, and sat beneath the lights. The interviewer asked one question: "Why now?" Claire looked into the camera. "My name is Claire Evelyn Sanders, not Marshall, not the woman in those videos, not the voice on that tape. I was rewritten, erased, but stories have power, and today I'm writing mine back." She didn't cry, didn't flinch. Somewhere, deep in the studio servers, her story echoed in frequencies that couldn't be silenced. The empire didn't crumble. It shattered. News anchors called it the Marshall Collapse. Stocks in Lucas's biotech holdings plummeted by 74% in less than 48 hours. The board ousted him without ceremony. Investors distanced themselves with press releases drenched in denial. Employees leaked Slack messages. Claire didn't even have to lift another finger. And then came the audit. The IRS raided the family trust, uncovering years of offshore accounts masked under names long dead. Claire's mother-in-law, always so elegant and sharp-tongued, was escorted from her home in a robe and slippers, photographed by every outlet Claire had fed information to. The woman once called Claire a fragile inconvenience. Now she wept behind mirrored glass in federal detention. For the first time in weeks, Claire slept. She dreamed of water, not drowning, but floating, weightless, unafraid. When she woke, Ethan was standing outside her apartment building. Same gray coat, same storm in his eyes. "I had nowhere else to go," he said. Claire didn't speak, just opened the door. Inside, he stood in the middle of the living room like a man visiting a crime scene. He didn't ask about Lucas, or the lawsuits, or the world watching him crumble in real time. He looked only at Claire. "I never stopped loving you," he said. She wanted to laugh. Instead, she poured tea. "I don't need your love," she said finally. "I needed your truth, and you didn't give it." Ethan sank into the couch. "I believed what they showed me, the videos, the voice. I thought I was losing my mind. You were, and you handed them the knife to cut it." Silence hung between them like fog. That night, Claire vomited twice. Blame the stress. Blame the tea. But when it happened again the next morning, she drove to a clinic, anonymously, quietly. The test came back positive. She was pregnant. The nurse asked gently, "Is that good news?" Claire didn't answer. Her mind whirred backward. Every timeline, every interaction, every shift in her body. She tried to remember when the nausea began, tried to remember if it was before or after the tea Lucas tampered with, or before Ethan returned to her bed during that silent, broken week in March. She couldn't tell, and that uncertainty was more terrifying than any deepfake. Later that night, an email arrived. No subject, no signature. "You think you're the smartest piece on the board, but you never saw the real player." Attached was a single sentence. "Check the foundation." Claire froze. The phrase was specific, echoing something her grandmother used to say during chess. But it wasn't just a metaphor. She returned to the cabin in the woods, this time searching under the floorboards she hadn't lifted before. There, wrapped in waterproof canvas, was an old box of letters. Letters her grandmother had saved, all from a girl named Isabel. Claire's hands trembled. Isabel Marshall, Lucas's sister, Ethan's younger sibling, dead at 16 in a boating accident no one questioned, except she wasn't dead. Claire rushed back to the city. She ran search scripts through encrypted databases, scanning every surveillance record, passport check, private biometric file she could access through Siren Protocol's back channels. And there she was, Isabel, now going by Elise Carter, founder of Velinex Systems. Lucas was the face. She was the mind. Claire sat frozen, breathing shallow. Then another email arrived, from Elise. "You ruined my brother, Claire, but you forgot. Ethan was never yours. He was mine before you ever met him." A video file was attached. Claire opened it, heart galloping. It was from 6 years ago, a small office. Ethan, younger, sitting beside a woman with long, dark hair and sharp cheekbones. Isabel. He was signing documents, laughing. She was pitching something on a whiteboard. The Claire construct. The first model of a digital clone. He had helped her build the system that would later destroy his wife. Claire stared at the screen, tears pricking her eyes but never falling. It was never just Lucas. It was never just Ethan. It was the kingdom itself, built on lies, held together by performance, and made entirely of glass. And now it was cutting her piece by piece. Claire didn't sleep. Not that night. Not after watching the video of Ethan and Isabel laughing over blueprints that looked like her own face, her own voice, her own life turned into a prototype. She sat in the dark, breathing in the silence, until the sun spilled through the blinds like an accusation. Then she moved. She gathered everything, every encrypted file, every deepfake record, every AI schema, every manipulation log she had recovered. She built a public portal under an anonymous server she named Athena's Fault Line. The name felt right, strategic, inevitable. Then she recorded a single video. She didn't wear makeup. She didn't dress up. She wore a gray hoodie and no jewelry and sat in front of the camera like she was meeting someone she once trusted. "My name is Claire Evelyn Sanders," she began. Her voice didn't tremble. "And for the last 3 years, I've been living inside a story I didn't write." She told them everything about the fall at the lake, about Lucas, about the fabricated affair, about the poisoned tea and the cloned face and the sister who never died. She didn't dramatize it. She laid it out like evidence in court, one line at a time. Clean, precise, undeniable. "Technology is neutral," she said, "but people aren't. They weaponize my name, my body, my memories. They wrote a version of me that could be controlled, but I'm done playing their myth." At the end, she gave them the link to the full archive. Anyone could verify it. Every byte of code, every fingerprint, every metadata chain. Then she hit upload. The clip went viral within hours. By morning, news outlets were calling it the real Claire broadcast. By evening, protests had begun outside Velinex headquarters. By midnight, the site crashed under traffic, then was mirrored across the world. Someone spray-painted her face on the side of a train station in Warsaw. A mural appeared in Seoul with her quote, "They tried to erase me, so I became indelible." Claire didn't leave the apartment. She watched it all unfold from behind her laptop, wrapped in a blanket, one hand resting unconsciously on her stomach. A day later, a black car appeared outside her door. A woman in a navy suit stepped out and knocked once. "Ms. Sanders," she said, flashing federal credentials, "we'd like to speak with you in Washington. There's a need for expertise in synthetic identity threat prevention. We think you're the only one qualified." Claire stared at her. "Why now?" The woman didn't flinch. "Because no one's ever done what you just did, and because we think this won't be the last time." Claire nodded once. "Give me 3 days." And then she disappeared. She drove west until the road stopped resembling memory. No press, no tech, just trees and sky and silence. When she finally stopped, it was a town with one traffic light and no cell towers. She rented a cabin and used cash. She didn't tell anyone the address, not even Layla, who had resurfaced with only one sentence. "You broke the game, girl. Proud of you." The boy was already there, the one who had pulled her from the lake months ago. He was older now, 15, and had been living in a foster program ever since. She'd tracked him down quietly, offered him a place. He didn't ask why. He just showed up with an old backpack and a laptop full of cracked software and encrypted bookmarks. His name was Milo. Together, they built a new firewall, not for war, for protection. Claire planted herbs. Milo coded. Sometimes they sat in silence for hours, the only sound the rustle of leaves or the click of keys. She didn't talk about Ethan or Isabel, or what it meant to raise a child when you weren't even sure whose war created them, but she wrote. Every morning she sat at the kitchen table with pen and paper, not a screen, and chronicled everything. The drowning, the manipulation, the resurrection. She called it The Woman Who Refused to Drown. She didn't write it for revenge or justice. She wrote it for memory, because stories can be deleted, but books last. On the last page, she scrawled a single sentence: "Truth isn't what survives, it's what you choose to carry." The child inside her kicked for the first time that afternoon. She smiled without thinking. Later that night, after Milo had gone to sleep and the fire had burned low, Claire opened her laptop. She hadn't checked email in weeks. There was only one message. No sender, no timestamp, just 5 words. "Do you think it's over?" Claire stared at the screen. Then she smiled, not with fear, but with understanding. Because myths don't end. They evolve.